Then the high priest and all his associates, who were members of the party of the Sadducees, were filled with jealousy. They arrested the apostles and put them in the public jail. But during the night, an angel of the Lord opened the doors of the jail and brought them out. "Go, stand in the temple courts," he said, "and tell the people all about this new life." At daybreak, they entered the temple courts as they had been told and began to teach the people. When the high priest and his associates arrived, they called together the Sanhedrin, the full assembly of the elders of Israel, and sent to the jail for the apostles. But on arriving at the jail, the officers did not find them there. So they went back and reported, "We found the jail securely locked with the guards standing at the doors, but when we opened them, we found no one inside." On hearing this report, the captain of the temple guard and the chief priests were at a loss, wondering what this might lead to. Then someone came and said, "Look, the men you put in jail are standing in the temple courts, teaching the people." At that, the captain went with his officers and brought the apostles. They did not use force because they feared that the people would stone them. A few weeks ago, I went with some of those on the Bishop's Certificates course to visit a synagogue in Birmingham. It was an amazing place, a beautiful and extraordinary building. Our guide took great pains to explain not just the history of the Jews, but the forms of worship and so on. It took me back to my childhood in London. I was born Jewish, and by contrast, the very humble synagogue where my family worshipped, just off the Portobello Road. It's now an upmarket bistro. But what I felt very strongly throughout our visit to the Birmingham synagogue was the question, just why didn't the Jews realize that Jesus was the longed-for Messiah? There are estimated to be around 300 prophecies foretelling the coming of the Messiah and detailing the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus. These prophecies stretch back thousands of years, but the Jews wouldn't believe and are still, sadly, waiting. So Jesus was a thorn in the side of the ruling elite. As well as physically overturning the tables of the moneylenders in the temple, he overturned all the preconceptions about the Messiah, such as that the Messiah would be a great leader who would get rid of the Romans. Instead, Jesus dismissed the hundreds of laws and rules which hedged around the daily lives of the Jews by saying there's just one golden rule: to love God and love your neighbour. Jesus preached, he performed miracles of healing, and in addition, and blasphemously to the religious Jewish leaders, he stated that he was the Son of God. So it wasn't surprising that those leaders hated and feared Jesus and would do anything at all to silence him. So they had him crucified. But Jesus wasn't to be silenced. Even after his death on the cross, at which those leaders must have breathed a huge sigh of relief, Jesus rose again, and through his apostles began to heal, to preach, and to convert thousands of people. The Sadducees were, by now, running scared. In the passage before this reading, we find that many signs and wonders were being performed by the apostles, and they were converting more and more people. Even Peter's shadow falling on the sick was enough to heal them. The Sadducees were the main party opposed to Jesus. Seen to some extent as collaborators with the Romans, it was partly because they were afraid of the reaction of Rome that they wished to get rid of this new movement. But their main and overriding motive was, of course, jealousy. Large crowds were flocking to the apostles, and they didn't like it. So they had the apostles arrested and thrown into prison. And then what happened? During the night, an angel of the Lord opened the gates for the apostles and told them to go back and continue preaching in the temple. Dawn finds the apostles back in the temple preaching about Jesus. When the Sanhedrin meet to summon the prisoners, they found that the birds had proverbially flown. Through locked doors and with guards at their posts, the apostles had disappeared. The Jewish authorities were amazed and bewildered. It's almost funny how they reacted to find that not only were the apostles gone from the prison, but they had the audacity to return to the temple and to carry on preaching and healing. So God miraculously delivered the apostles on that occasion. But we shouldn't think that God will always do this, or that when he does, it will happen in the same way. There are countless Christians today who are persecuted and often in jail. Some will stay there until they die, and we should remember them in our prayers. The point isn't that God will always deliver Christians when they're suffering. The point of this reading is that God is making a statement about who's really in control of the situation. And it's not the Jewish authorities, it's God. God's power doesn't make for an easier life. For us here in this country, we aren't put in prison for our faith, but we can be challenged in different ways, sometimes in subtle ways. It might be that people don't like what we say about our faith. It might be opposition to an issue of justice that's important to us. It might be in the disbelieving look. The, "Oh really? You really believe that?" said in possibly mocking tones. What is important is to simply obey the voice of conscience, to simply obey God. God is all-powerful. How he uses that power differs, but the power of God that provokes the world to persecute the church, that same power enables the church to persevere through suffering to spread the good news. And this good news will advance because God's purpose in the risen Christ to spread the gospel cannot fail. Amen.